I cleaned out my refrigerator last week, and I want to tell you what I found because it shamed me. A bag of greens gone to slime in the drawer. Half a loaf of bread gone green at the heel. A container of leftovers I couldn't even name anymore, pushed to the back and forgotten. Good food. Food somebody grew and somebody shipped and I paid for, scraped into the trash without a second thought. And most of us never even notice we're doing it. The trash can fills, the grocery cart fills again, and round it goes. But there was a whole generation that would have stood in my kitchen and wept at that trash can. The people who came through the Great Depression, who knew real hunger, who learned in the hardest years of this country's life that you do not waste a single thing the good Lord puts in your hands. They had no refrigerator, most of them. And yet they kept a whole winter's food without one and lost almost nothing. My name is Pastor Eli, and today I'm going to give you 5 of their methods. 5 ways the Depression generation preserved food and made it last. Every one of them cheap, every one of them simple, and every one of them written down by hand in a book I'm going to tell you about in a minute. By the end, you'll be able to keep root vegetables for half a year, dry a summer garden for winter, ferment food that gets better as it sits, and keep food in the one substance on earth that never spoils. But I'd be a poor shepherd if I handed you old methods without the truth about each one. Some of these are foolproof. Some of them have a single safety rule that you must follow, and if you don't, you'll do more harm than good. I'll give you that rule plainly for every one, because preserving food the wrong way is worse than not preserving it at all. Honest is better than sorry, and I'm saving the best for last. The 5th method is the one that stops people cold because it lets you keep a fresh egg, a real, good, fresh egg, for a full year without a refrigerator, without freezing it, without a single bit of electricity. The Depression folks did it in a crock by the cellar stairs. I'll show you exactly how, and I'll tell you the 2 things you must get right because they matter. Stay with me to the end for that one. Let me first tell you where I found all 5 written down, because it's a sweeter story than I expected. A woman in our congregation, well into her 80s now, handed me a book after a Wednesday supper last fall. She called it the receipt book. That's the old word for it, receipt, the way folks used to say recipe. It was a thick, soft, swollen thing, the cover worn to felt, and it had been kept by the women of a country church through the 1930s and 40s. Recipes, yes, but so much more than recipes. How to stretch a ham to feed a family for a week, how to get 3 meals out of 1 chicken, and page after page in the back, in a dozen different hands, the ways they kept food through the winter when there was no money and no electric and no store to run to. Some entries were signed, most weren't. One of them, in a careful, slanted hand, had a line written across the top of the page, like a heading for the whole section. It said, "Waste not, for the Lord gave it," and underneath, the methods I'm about to give you. That line stayed with me because it's almost the very words of Christ. When he had fed the 5,000 on the hillside and the people had eaten their fill, he told the disciples to gather up the fragments that remained, that nothing be lost. That nothing be lost. The Lord of all creation, who had just made bread out of almost nothing, would not allow even the leftovers to be wasted. And those country women, 80 years ago, with their swollen receipt book, understood that down in their bones. So let me give you what they knew. The first method is the simplest, and it's the one that surprised me most by how well it works. You store your root vegetables in sand. Carrots, beets, turnips, parsnips, the firm vegetables that grow down in the ground, will keep for 4, 5, even 6 months if you store them right. And the old way to store them is in a box of damp sand. Here's how. You take a wooden box or a sturdy bin and you put down a layer of sand, just barely damp. the dampness of a wrung-out sponge and no more. You lay your carrots or beets on it, not touching each other, and you cover them with another layer of damp sand and another layer of vegetables, and so on, until the box is full. Then you set that box somewhere cold and dark and steady, a cellar, an unheated garage, a cold back room. Just above freezing is perfect. The sand does two things. It keeps the vegetables from touching the air so they don't dry out and go wimp. And it keeps them from touching each other, so if one starts to turn, it can't spread to its neighbors. The vegetables come out in February as firm and sweet as the day you pulled them. Sweeter even, because the cold turns their starch to sugar. I tried this myself 2 winters ago, half not believing it would work. I put a dozen carrots from the garden into a feed bucket of damp sand down in the cool of my basement in October. I'll be honest, I forgot about them. It was the end of January before I dug one out, and I expected to find a bucket of slime. Instead, I pulled out a carrot as firm and crisp and bright as the day I'd buried it, 3 months on, and it crunched like it had just come from the ground. I stood there in the basement eating a January carrot, and I thought of all the carrots I'd let go soft in a plastic bag in the refrigerator over the years, and I felt that old shame again. The sand had done in the dark what all my modern conveniences could not. Here is your one rule for this one, and it's an easy one. Do not wash them first. You brush the loose dirt off, you cut the leafy tops down to about 1 inch, but you leave the skin alone, and you do not wash them, because the moisture you'd add is the very thing that starts the rot. Dry and dirty keeps, clean and damp spoils. And one more small thing the receipt book noted. Keep your apples in a different place entirely, never in with the root vegetables, because apples breathe out something into the air that makes everything around them spoil faster. The old folks didn't know the chemistry of it. They just knew apples ruin a root cellar, and they were right. That's the book of Proverbs made practical, friend. Go to the ant, it says, consider her ways and be wise. She gathers her food in the harvest and stores it against the winter. A box of sand in a cold cellar is the ant's wisdom, nothing more. That first one keeps your food in the cold and the dark. The second one does the opposite. It keeps your food by taking something away from it. And once you understand what, you'll see why it lasts for years. The second method is drying, and this is the one your great-grandmother probably remembered best, because the smell of it filled the house every fall. When you take the water out of food, nothing can grow in it. Mold needs moisture. Bacteria need moisture. Take the water away and the food simply keeps, sometimes for years. The Depression folks dried everything they could, but 2 things above all: green beans and apples. The dried green beans had a name. They called them leather britches. And if you grew up in the country, you may remember them hanging in long strings across the kitchen. You take fresh green beans whole, and with a needle and a length of stout thread, you string them one after another, right through the middle of each bean into a long garland. You hang those garlands somewhere warm and dry and airy, out of the direct sun, the back porch, the attic, above the wood stove, and you let them dry until they're leathery and then brittle, a week or 2. Then you store them in a sack or a jar. Come January, you drop a handful into a pot of water with a bit of ham, and they swell back up and cook into something that tastes like the memory of summer. Apples you do the same way, sliced into rings, the core pushed out, dipped quick in a little salt water to keep them from going brown, then strung up or laid on screens to dry until they're soft and leathery. A child of the Depression could make a whole winter's worth of dried apples from one good tree, and never lose an apple to rot. Your one rule for drying is this: bone dry or don't bother. If there is any moisture left in that bean or that apple ring when you put it away, it will mold in the jar and ruin the batch. So you dry it longer than you think you need to, until a bean snaps instead of bending, until an apple ring is leathery clear through, and you store it somewhere dry, and you check it after a week. If you see any moisture beaded inside the jar, it's not dry enough, and back out it comes. Dry food keeps for years. Half-dry food rots. There's no in-between. The third method changes the food into something that keeps itself, and it's the one that fascinates me most, because it works by setting good life against bad. It's fermentation. And the simplest, oldest example is cabbage turned into kraut. Here's the wonder of it. When you pack shredded cabbage with a little salt and keep it under its own juices, away from the air, the good bacteria that live naturally on the cabbage wake up and go to work. They eat the sugars in the cabbage and they make acid, a clean, sour acid. And that acid does two things. It preserves the cabbage so it keeps for months, and it makes the cabbage better for you than it was fresh, easier to digest, richer in the things your body needs. The old folks couldn't have told you the science. They just knew a crock of kraut in the cellar would feed the family through the winter and keep them well. To make it, you shred your cabbage fine and you mix in salt. About 3 tablespoons of salt to every 5 pounds of cabbage. You work it with your hands, squeezing and pressing, until the salt pulls the water out of the cabbage and a brine forms. Then you pack it down tight into a crock or a big jar, and you press it until the brine rises up and covers it completely. And there is your one rule for this one, and it is the most important safety rule of all 5, so hear me. The cabbage must stay under the brine, completely submerged under the liquid the whole time it's working, down where the air can't reach it. The good bacteria rule, and the food is safe and keeps for months. But anything that pokes up above the brine and touches the air can grow mold. So you weigh the cabbage down with a clean plate and a clean jar of water on top of it. You keep it under the surface, and if a little fuzz ever forms on the very top, you just lift it off, because the kraut underneath, safe under the brine, is fine. Under the brine, it keeps. Above the brine, it spoils. That's the whole secret, and the old folks lived by it. So far, we've kept food cold, dried it, and soured it. The fourth method does none of those. It asks nothing of you at all. No cellar, and no crock, and no labor. And it uses the one food on God's earth that the years cannot touch: honey. Honey does not go bad, not in a year, not in 100 years, not in 3,000. They have opened tombs in Egypt, sealed up for thousands of years, and found pots of honey inside, still good, still sweet, still edible. Nothing else we eat can say that, and the reason is beautiful in its simplicity. Honey has almost no water in it, so nothing can grow. It's slightly acid, which stops bacteria, and the bees themselves leave a trace in it that fights off spoilage. The Lord built a preservative and put it inside a flower, and gave a little insect the wisdom to gather it. A jar of honey in your pantry is the one food you own that will outlive you. But the old folks didn't just keep honey, they kept food in honey. Fruit especially, packed down in a jar and covered over completely with honey, would keep for months without spoiling, because the honey sealed it away from the air and the moisture and pulled the very water out of anything that could rot. Berries, sliced fruit, even some herbs, laid down in honey and sealed, kept sweet through the winter. The honey took on the flavor of the fruit, and the fruit was preserved by the honey, and nothing was lost. There's no hard safety rule here, only good sense. Use real honey, keep your jar and your spoon clean and dry so you don't introduce water, and keep the lid on. That's all. Honey is the most forgiving preserver there is, and Scripture knew its worth. A land flowing with milk and honey the Lord called the promised land. My son, eat thou honey, says the book of Proverbs, because it is good. The old believers had honey in the cupboard and a verse to go with it. Now we come to the fifth, the one I promised you, the one that stops people cold. Keeping fresh eggs, good and fresh, for a full year, with no refrigeration at all. The Depression folks and the war generation did it in a crock, and they called it putting the eggs down in water glass. Here's the trouble with an eggshell. It looks solid, but it isn't. An eggshell is covered with thousands of tiny pores, little holes too small to see, that let air pass in and moisture pass out. That's how an egg goes bad. Air and bacteria creep in through the pores, and the egg slowly spoils. So the old folks figured out that if you could seal up those pores, the egg would keep almost forever. And they did it by submerging fresh eggs in a solution called water glass, a thick liquid that coats the shell and seals every pore against the air. The eggs sit fully covered in that solution in a crock, down in the cool cellar, and they keep fresh inside for the better part of a year. Some folks coated the shells with lard or grease instead, to seal the pores the same way, and that worked too. Now here are the two things you must get right, because they matter more than anything. First, the eggs must be fresh and unwashed. Fresh from a hen, with the natural bloom still on the shell, never washed. A washed egg, like most every egg you buy at the store, has had that natural seal scrubbed off, and it will not keep this way. So this is a method for farm eggs, your own hens or neighbors, gathered clean and put down fresh, never washed. Second, every egg must be clean and whole. Never put down a cracked egg or a dirty one, because one bad egg can spoil the crock. And when you take an egg out to use months later, you do the simple test the old folks always did. You set it in a bowl of water. If it lays down on its side on the bottom, it's good. If it stands up or floats, you let it go. And you crack each one into its own cup before it goes in the pan, just to be sure. Follow those rules. Use a proper water glass solution mixed to the directions, and you'll pull a good fresh egg out of that crock in the dead of winter, months after the hens slowed down, when you'd otherwise have none at all. Think about what that meant to a family in the hard years. A hen lays well in the warm months and slows nearly to nothing in the cold and the dark of winter, which is exactly when a family most needs the food. So in spring and summer, when the eggs came faster than they could be eaten, the woman of the house didn't let a single one go to waste. She put the extras down in the crock, dozens of them, layer on layer in the water glass, sealed against the winter. And when the snow came and the hens went quiet, she reached down into that crock and brought up eggs from June to feed her children in January. During the war years, when so much was rationed and scarce, this one skill kept eggs on the table in millions of homes that would otherwise have done without. It was ordinary then. Every farm wife knew it. And then the refrigerator came, and the grocery store on every corner, and within a single generation, almost nobody remembered that you could keep an egg for a year in a crock by the cellar stairs. But you can. It still works. It worked for your great-grandmother, and it will work for you. That's 5. Sand for your roots, drying for your beans and apples, the crock of kraut, the honey that never dies, and the eggs put down in water glass. 5 ways the Depression generation made sure that nothing at all, was ever lost. Now I want to take a moment, friend, because this is the part that matters most, and it's bigger than any one of these methods. Think about how far we've drifted. We have been taught, slowly and thoroughly, that food is disposable, that you buy it fresh every few days. Use what you feel like using, and scrape the rest into the can without a thought. We throw away near a third of all the food we buy in this country. A third. Bought with real money, grown by real hands, and thrown in the trash. And then we drive back to the store and buy it again. Over a lifetime of running a household, a family pours tens of thousands of dollars straight into the garbage and calls it normal. I won't tell you there's a villain behind it. It's simpler and sadder than that. A nation that wastes a third of its food buys a third more food than it needs. And there is a great deal of money in a customer who throws away half of what he carries home and comes back next week for more. Nobody had to plan it. A people who forgot how to keep their food became a people who must keep buying it. The skill went quiet, one generation at a time, and the waste just became the water we swim in. And it grieves me, because what was lost was not just 5 clever methods. It was a whole way of seeing what we've been given. Those Depression folks didn't preserve food because they were thrifty by temperament. They did it because they believed, down in their souls, that the food on the table was a gift from the hand of God, and that to waste a gift from God was something close to a sin. That conviction is what we really lost, not the recipes, the reverence. You remember Joseph in the book of Genesis. God showed him 7 years of plenty coming, and behind them 7 years of famine. And what did Joseph do? He stored up the grain through the good years, gathered it and kept it and wasted none of it, so that when the famine came, a whole nation lived instead of dying. That's the same wisdom, friend, written large across history. Gather in the plenty. Keep what you're given. Waste nothing. And you will have something to share when the lean times come. When the Lord fed the multitude and told them to gather up the fragments, that nothing be lost, he was teaching the very same lesson on a hillside with a basket of bread. The God who can make plenty out of nothing still asks us not to waste the fragments. Not because he couldn't make more, because the wasting itself is the wrong. Those women with their receipt book understood it. Waste not, for the Lord gave it. That's the inheritance the old folks left us, not money. Most of them had next to none. They left us the knowing that everything on our table is a gift, and the skill to keep it, and the reverence to waste none of it. So here is what I want you to do this week. Pick just one of the 5. Put a box of damp sand in a cold corner, and lay down some carrots. String up a garland of beans or a few apple rings to dry. Pack a small crock of cabbage and keep it under the brine. Keep a jar of honey, and remember it will never spoil. And if you have a neighbor with hens, ask about putting a few fresh eggs down for the winter. Just one of the 5 this week. That's all. And tell me down in the comments, did your people preserve food this way? Do you remember leather breeches hanging in the kitchen, or a crock of kraut in the cellar, or eggs put down in water glass? And what did your family do to make sure nothing was ever lost? I read every one of these, and the old ways you share with each other are a big part of why I keep doing this. Next time, I'm going to show you how the faithful kept their food cold all summer long. Butter firm and milk sweet, with no electricity and no ice, using nothing but 2 clay pots, a handful of sand, and a little water. It's the natural next step after today. Subscribe and walk along with me so you don't miss it. Until then, look well to what you've been given, waste nothing, and God bless.